Greetings to all of our viewers and listeners. This is our first session of the WMD podcast. My name is Oliver Boyd-Barrett, and I have with me three of the other four founder members of this series. And our intention will be to do a podcast on a very regular basis. We are anticipating either once a week or at the very least once every fortnight. That's something that we will clarify very soon. My friends and my colleagues who are here today are Sumanth Inukonda, Christian Vukasovich, and Ben Thomason. We wanted to create an opportunity for discussion amongst ourselves first of all, so as to better enable our own endeavors to make sense of what we agree are extremely important times of change in the geopolitical tectonic plates, as it were, of our social, political, and cultural world. We have for some time now shared a deep sense that we are living history in a way that we have never in our lives experienced until now. And we also hope that in our attempts to make better sense of what we can see and understand of what is happening in the world around us, we also hope that this will be of interest, of benefit perhaps, to all of you who will be viewing and listening to us. And we fully expect that over time, as we become more comfortable with this project, we will be inviting in some other guests and some other parties also to collaborate with us in this enterprise. In this very first session, we're going to limit ourselves primarily to give you a chance to share what we think are our particular perspectives, particular experiences and backgrounds, what there is of our backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives that is likely to be relevant in this sense-making project that we have embarked on. So that having been said, I will go first of all to Christian with a reminder to everybody that this is the first opportunity that our audience will have, I think, in getting to understand you and where you're coming from and what is likely to be distinctive about what it is, your way of making sense of these events. So, Christian, over to you.
My name's Christian Vukasovich. I am both speaking from a perspective of a scholar who has studied the political economy of media, who has looked specifically at issues of media, war, and conflict, and their intersections with culture, especially when it comes to more of the darker variants of extremism and ethno-nationalism. But I'm also coming to this perspective as someone who's increasingly looking at how those issues that we've looked at so deeply as a scholar show up when the policy hits the road and how that actually impacts the people who are going to pay the price or reap the benefits of foreign policy issues and how media operates on this wider scale. And so right now, I should fully disclose that I am a candidate running to be the U.S. House Representative for Michigan's 5th District. So when I talk about issues here, I'm bringing in both my scholarly perspective as well as that of someone who's keenly looking at how this is going to be impacting the role of the United States in the world, what is our strengths and what we can accomplish, but also how that's going to impact people here at home in a very real and concrete sense. I'll hand it over to Sumanth, and he can tell us a little bit about his background.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks.
Thank you, Christian and Oliver. Thanks for having me here. I'm Sumanth Inukonda. I teach at the City University of New York, but hello today from India. I research, my research has been at the intersections of media, nationalism, globalization, and also imperial interventions. So my first book, um, which which was based on my dissertation, for which Oliver here was my advisor, was about Telangana movement and how I see it as being at the intersections of media, nationalism, and globalization. So I have been engaged with media in India, and things look very different from here when we compare it to Western mainstream media. So that has been one of my focus areas. And last year, I co-edited a book again with Oliver and another member of my dissertation committee, Lara Lengel, which was on the Afghan war. So I am increasingly getting interested in geopolitical events from I could say a global South perspective. Um, when I look at mainstream media or alternative media in India, I get a different view of things, a different kinds of priorities there, and that is what you know. I think I can bring to the table and join in interesting discussions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sumanth. Let us go over to Ben.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on here. I'm very excited to be part of this project. My background is that I am a history professor at the University of South Florida. I'm a visiting professor, still looking to get a full-time job. My research focuses in American empire, U.S. foreign policy, soft power, geopolitics, degrees in history and American studies. For me, the namesake of this channel, WMD, Weapons of Mass Destruction, has been with me since as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories are of the global war on terror, particularly some of the iconic images of the American invasion of Iraq and tearing down the statue of Saddam Hussein in the middle of Baghdad and such. And ever since then, I had always been fascinated by the idea of America promoting democracy around the world and doing that through the barrel of a gun, basically. That the way we promote democracy is by getting our weapons together, going on to the other side of the world and killing a bunch of people. Strange way to promote democracy, but it's a tradition that goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson entering World War I with the slogan of course, making the world safe for democracy. I'm a working class guy from middle America, very conservative, salt of the earth family. Managed to work my way through college and get a degree and even get a job in academia. And I think the perspective that I bring is one of both someone who has been steeped in these issues of American empire and soft power and media and civil society my entire life, and also as someone who has been actively involved in trying to organize to change things in the United States in the time that I've had. And I'm very excited to bring a perspective that is critical and hopefully offers a positive perspective of what can be done about the situation that we're in and the strange and interesting times we find ourselves in.
Thank you so much, Ben. So glad that you're with us, and so glad that that you're with us, Sumanth and Christian, and I'm looking strongly forward to all the discussions that we're going to have over the coming weeks and months. As for myself, I can say that I am a professor emeritus, both of Bowling Green State University in Ohio and also from California State University, Pomona. I continue to teach for California State University at its Channel Islands campus. As is true of all of our contributors, my background has largely been about media and about communication. So this is something very important, I think, that we each of us share, even if we have built on that foundation in quite different ways. I believe it's true to say. I started my career as a researcher into news agencies, that is to say, organizations like Associated Press or Reuters or Agence France Presse. And I continue to do a lot of media-related work, but I experienced a significant shift in or around 2010, 2011, where I began to focus much more, not so much on the media themselves as organizations, particularly as organizations that follow political economic routines that help to explain much of what it is that they do or fail to do, and became much more interested in what it was that they were saying or not saying from the point of view of a scholar of propaganda. And from that base, I wrote a book on media imperialism, which included, I'm proud to say, this is back in 2014 when I was completing that book, I included a chapter that was mainly about Iran, was mainly about what I consider to be this entirely scabrous, false, fabricated narrative about Iran as a nuclear threat. That was very evident to me looking at this issue back in 2014. And of course, my impressions have only developed in the same direction since that time. I went on to write a book on the conflict in Ukraine, not long after what I now simply call, without beating around the bush, the US and EU orchestrated coup d'etat in the streets of Maidan in Kiev in 2014. I then was interested in the growing, or rather the froth and the bubble of Russiagate, the narrative as to how Donald Trump was an agent. At least I can always make myself laugh when I remember this. Donald Trump is an agent of Putin. And I was involved in 2 books, actually, in dissecting that particular laughable narrative, although laughable though it may be, but it has also been, sadly, incredibly impactful on our political system for the worse. I went on to write a book about the so-called Civil War. It wasn't a civil war. It was a war of the West and the Gulf state monarchies against Syria, an Arab nationalist, largely sectarian, largely non-sectarian, secular regime. And I then, more recently, as Sumanth has mentioned, I had the joy of writing a book with Sumanth and with Laura Lengel on Afghanistan and ways in which Afghanistan has been represented, in particular during the period of Russian invasion of Afghanistan, and then of course, a little time later, the invasion of Afghanistan by the United States on the pretext that Afghanistan had something to do with something called 9/11. I think I'll just bring those remarks to a close, and then picking up and Ben, you've started us already thinking about this term WMD. It wasn't a term I had myself been thinking about very consciously recently, but since was it you, Sumanth, who first proposed it as a possible title that would give cohesive meaning to us as a group. But the more I think about it, the more apt it does seem. So I'd be particularly interested to hear I'll start with you, Christian, to hear you begin to unpack. What does WMD mean for you?
Well, thank you, Oliver. WMD really cuts to the heart of the way I've been looking at media and particularly the role of media in times of conflict or issues of conflict and security for probably the last 20 years or so. And that's because we often talk about media and its relationship to propaganda and its relationship to power in terms of media being a battleground on which people fight, players fight for public opinion. And one of the things that my research had started to take me through in graduate school as I was looking at news coverage of conflicts, particularly the U.S. strikes on Yugoslavia in 1999 and the subsequent conflict throughout the Balkans, or the previous conflict throughout the Balkans, I should say, is that the media really wasn't a battleground for public opinion. In fact, that battle had long ago been fought and won. And what we were really seeing was that media was indeed not so much the battleground, but the weapon itself, because media was used and deployed in certain ways in order to promote or capacitate military intervention in several different fashions. And so we would see it from the deployment of public relations agencies so that they could deflect and political players could then, instead of having to claim things themselves, claim to instead be reacting to news just like the rest of us. It's the direct targeting of enemy, journalists in order to silence the news. It's using weapons as a kinetic or information and setting up interviews as a direct kinetic use of force to assassinate public officials on the other side. And it's constraining the ability of journalists to actually get out and report on what's happening on the ground by curtailing them into a pool system or embedding them with troops. And so I started to look at how we actually have, so many theories of propaganda that help us to understand the ideology behind propaganda and the concepts behind who's benefiting and how and for what purposes. But what we really need to look at, and I think this is why I engage with WMD as a term so much, instead of looking at it as weapons of mass distraction, I really look at it as a part of a weapons of mass destruction, is that media itself has weaknesses. It has certain choke points in the process, in the professional practices, and in the business model, and in the rules and regulations that are constraining it, and then the technologies that are used in its dissemination that can very quickly and easily in a time of conflict be operationalized, so to speak. They can be weaponized. They can turn media and weaponize media in order to promote certain narratives that are going to drive us relentlessly and inevitably into a conflict. And so my approach to this concept of WMD is really looked at through that lens. How do we come to understand the issues that are around us? And are the sources of information that we get to understand those issues themselves problematic? Because, as we've long said, I'm sure Oliver can tell us right from the beginning, right off the top of his head, who said this, but we've always said that the news journalism, media is the first draft of history. But when we undermine that draft, when we deploy propaganda in a sustained and considerable effort, we produce narratives themselves that can't be trusted. And yet afterwards, we come back and we form scholarship based on those narratives. We form public policy based on those narratives. And in some ways, to put it bluntly, we end up building policy that is based on a belief in our own BS to some degree. And that creates a lot of significant issues when we start to talk about, well, what have we learned from this conflict and what really happened and how is that going to inform a better outcome in the next conflict that we engage in? So when I look at WMD, I'm really looking at it from a more holistic political economy perspective, but I'm also bringing in a little bit of how that plays out, not just in our cultural understanding of events, but also in the policy that we build off of those and we move forward with. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Sumanth.
Thank you, Christian and Oliver and Ben. So with we first heard this with the Iraq War, right? As war propaganda and the pretext for entering Iraq. And I mean, people were extremely skeptical, but this was one instance where war propaganda was decisively proved to be false because there were no weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq. And this kind of sits at the intersections of themes in media and communication, such as propaganda, and it shows a kind of nexus between political elite, which is White House, and the media elite, which various different propaganda models address, including indexing and other models as well. So this is kind of central. But what I think is not very satisfactory is somehow subsequently it has been ignored, and subsequently we've seen many such repeated assertions and repeated wars, and every time we kind of go back. So somehow it is seen as an exception, and I think that is where we need to challenge it. It doesn't seem to be an exception. It seems to be part of how empire and media operate. All right, so it's really at that intersection, and I think what is also quite evident is the way media was weaponized, right? Which I think is another term that we can coin, weaponized media discourses, right? So there are, I think, and if we can broaden that term, we could include certain kinds of identity mobilizations that are done through media. We've seen that with war on terror, as well as justifications for unleashing oppressive state apparatus, either within nations or internationally, which Western hegemonic powers can do. So this, I think, opens up a lot of possibilities if we start thinking of WMDs as a template. And let me add one other thing. I think those of us who are trying to resist, Oliver, we should make it's very difficult to tell, right, with all kinds of media and all kinds of infiltrations within media that you have written about, and especially in geopolitics, when you are commenting on things that are happening in real time. It is very difficult to tell what is true and what is not. But I think as rational, ethical actors, we should try to be truthful to the extent that we understand, and also, I would say, scientific to the extent that we understand.
Thank you so much, Sumanth. A very wise counsel, I believe. Ben, you began to talk about WMD just a little while ago. I wonder, just picking up on this concept of weaponization, and which seems to be coming. I encounter it more and more. That concept of being used by all kinds of people in all kinds of ways, and I do find it very helpful. I'm wondering, Ben, should we unpack this a little bit more? I mean, when we're talking about weaponization in this context of imperial power, the power to use all forms of communication or discourse that before, once upon a time, seemed neutral and innocent and unremarkable, are now being used as weapons of war. I just wonder whether should we be talking only about formal news media in this context, or are we talking about a much sort of broader range of phenomena here?
I think the connection between information, news, narratives, and violence is really key for what we want to talk about, and just what is going on in so much of the world. That yes, we need to broaden out these issues and have much broader conversation, but at a simpler, more human level. I think what we see is a pattern of increasing violence that has the possibility of escalating in all sorts of ways, and how it is already is grotesque and obscene. Mm-hmm. And the inability to deal with that reality, to acknowledge that reality, to address what needs to change, to have a more humane, civilized world, to build humanity, as a historian like Vijay Prashad loves to say, that it's obscene to be a power like the United States and like so many of the rich and powerful of this world that have all sorts of means, technologies, and resources to broadcast a idealized image of themselves, to pretend to be the champions of truth and human rights and democracy and freedom in the world, while spitting on those concepts every single day in your actions, in the way that society functions on an everyday basis, and increasingly so. So I think that's how I would think about yes, how to broaden this thing, but also to ground it in something very human and simple that so many people are experiencing, even if they can't articulate it in an academic sense.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ben, for those comments, and I'd like to just link to them to put in my two penny worth, as the British would say, or 2 cents worth in this regard. I mean, I, like you, I definitely associate the term WMD with the US-led invasion of the sovereign nation of Iraq in 2003 on totally false pretext. And the falsity of the pretext was that Iraq was in possession of weapons of mass destruction, although oftentimes those were not defined. You wasn't sure, are they talking nuclear? Are they talking chemical? What are they talking about, really? And then I associate the term WMD with the shock that I think came to many of us quite early on, the shock that there are no WMD there, because the chief weapons inspector, who was the guy who was charged to get rid of all of these, has told us he got rid of them. They're not there. And if there are any left, they would by now be decomposed and totally useless. So that was it perhaps shouldn't have been such a shock, but at that point I just had that sense that the performance of mainstream media, something that I had always been, at least I thought I had always been deeply skeptical about, I realized I hadn't been nearly enough skeptical about mainstream media. And that sent me to thinking then about I won't say that Iraq, the invasion of Iraq was the first internet war. I don't think that can really be true, because before then we had the Balkans and other conflicts in Chechnya and so on. But as I thought more about the role of the internet, I realized that through the internet, I was latching into, or I was connecting with, themes and issues and discussions and debates, even though many of them may have been false, but they were ones that I was not aware of previously, because in the era in which mainstream media totally monopolized public communication, we never got to see what was being excluded from us. We never were offered the opportunity to make a judgment about what is true, what is worthwhile, what is untrue, what is not worthwhile. The mainstream media, with all of their very close links to power, in fact, they're part of the power structure, the mainstream media made those judgments for us. So that also leads me to think not only that, well, at least now we have a better basis for critiquing and assessing the role of mainstream media, but also important though that is, but we should learn from that just how uninformed we must therefore be about any history that depends significantly on what mainstream media were saying about anything at any point over the last 200 to 300 years. In other words, I think that this whole experience of the WMD experience tells us we have to relearn our history. And part of the relearning of that history is the learning that Western civilization is not what it says it is. Stop listening to people from the West telling us about how wonderful Western civilization is, because that is bullshit. The West gave us the Nazis. The West gave us 2 world wars. The West gave us brutal colonization of 3/4 or more of the world for 200 or more years. So I think I'll leave it at that. I think that the message is probably too obvious. But gentlemen, I've deeply enjoyed this first conversation that we have had. But before closing it out, is there anything that any of you would like to throw in?
Well, I would like to thank Ben for bringing up the issue of violence, and I think that falls within the scheme of what I was talking about, this oppressive state behaviors. Yeah. So there are also forms of violence that are deeply institutionalized, and then there are outright wars. So thanks to Ben for throwing in that very important term, and thanks to all of you. I mean, Oliver is really challenging us with this idea of relearning and start questioning. Go back in history. I think it's a very challenging proposition, and of course Christian, who's bringing in some real world gravitas to this issue as he walks through this difficult political climate.
Well, I think what you've all touched on is really the challenge at the heart of this. I mean, as those of us who have taught media courses for so long, we've all taught a course on history of newspapers and the development of the Gazzetta in Italy, and how that all formed as a way of gathering intelligence so that people could make sound decisions with information. And that really has been an idea that we've kept in mind at the heart of media when we approach it. But as Mark Twain pointed out so deftly as he always does, if you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed. But when you read the newspapers, you're misinformed, right? And so that really does pose a challenge for everyday people to try to understand what is happening in the world. And I'm hoping as we look at this issue and we delve into it, we don't just toss away all that we depend on with these news narratives, certainly to look with a critical eye and to ask engaging questions about those, but also to explore how do we utilize these in a way that's going to be constructive, and how do we contest their usage or their weaponization, as we've talked about, and how can we tell the difference between those who are actually serving a purpose of information, however flawed that might be, and the outright dissemination. And for folks like myself and Oliver, and I'm sure the all of us here who have taught any courses on propaganda, that is the challenge indeed. But it's also, if anything, really the moment of history that we're in right now in an information society and an information economy that's so dependent upon that information. How can we trust it? How do we move forward? How do we build a basis of understanding who we are as a people, identity-wise? How do we frame a national perspective that comes through this? How do we understand the conflicts that we're in with other people and the route through? And we live in an era that's as many have said, a post-truth era. And so I'm very excited about these conversations we're going to have, and I can't wait to see what Ben and Sumanth and you, Oliver, and everyone else who's joining us has to bring to the table.
Well, thank you so much, Christian. Thank you, everybody. And I look forward to rejoining with you very soon for our next podcast, which is going to deal with the US-Iran conflict and the MOU and where we are with that. Thank you, gentlemen. And I'm going to sign us off now.
Thank you, everyone.